"You're not on the list." Those words hit harder than I expected. Mostly because of how casually they were spoken. The event planner barely looked at me as she held the clipboard between us like a shield. Behind her, the glittering hotel ballroom was alive with clinking glasses, laughter, and the soft echo of jazz drifting from the live quartet near the stage. Blink. "You check again, Ashley Carter. I'm with the strategy division." Her mouth twitched, a rehearsed, almost apologetic smile. "Sorry, this is for select leadership and award recipients only." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there on the sidewalk, heels sinking slightly into the snow-softened carpet leading up to the entrance. The January air bit at my skin, but the sting in my chest was worse. Behind me, the crowd of arriving guests moved past, chatting and laughing, welcomed in without hesitation. Then came the voice I dreaded. "Oh wow, you actually showed up." Turned. It was Kelsey, my coworker, and the intern who'd somehow been promoted after presenting my year-long project as her own. She wore a floor-length navy gown in confidence like perfume. Beside her, her date smirked and looked me over, like I was some out-of-place caterer. "Who invites a nobody?" She laughed, brushing past me and disappearing into the warmth and light. I could have left right then. Most would have. But I stood there a moment longer, letting the reality settle over me like frost on a window pane. 6 years. 6 years of late nights, hitting deadlines no one else could. Fixing systems I didn't break. Building models they didn't understand. And still I was standing outside while the people who stepped on my work were celebrated inside. Then I felt the vibration in my coat pocket. It was my phone. The screen lit up with one word. "Ready." It was the message I'd been waiting for. I didn't hesitate. I hit send and walked away. Before I tell you what that message did, before the calls, the chaos, the fallout, I want you to pause. Just for a moment. Have you ever stood outside something you helped build? Watched from the cold while others drank the wine you bought, wore the clothes you ironed, delivered the speech you wrote? If you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or called a nobody by people who only succeeded because of you, then this story is for you. Because what happened next changed everything. My name is Ashley Carter. Until that night, I was a senior strategy analyst at Ethereum Logistics, a rising disruptor in the supply chain industry, as the trade magazines like to call it. And for most of my career, I believed that hard work was enough. My background wasn't flashy. I didn't go to an Ivy. I wasn't related to a board member. Didn't flirt with executives during Friday happy hours. I just delivered over and over. I had built a simulation model that saved the company $2.6 million in Q3. Caught a forecasting error that would have tanked a 7-figure client deal. Created the real-time optimization algorithm that ironically was being celebrated at that very gala. But none of that mattered the day Dominic Foster became our new VP. Dominic was the kind of leader who used charm like a blade. Smooth in meetings, sharp in private. He praised ideas in public, then dissected you in one-on-ones. And somehow Kelsey, the intern, was always nearby. She started sitting in on meetings she wasn't invited to, echoed phrases I'd used in private Slack messages, quoted numbers only I had analyzed. First I thought it was coincidence. Then came the board meeting in October. Wasn't invited, but Kelsey presented my model word for word, my charts, my metrics, even my color coding. And Dominic beamed with pride as if she were his protege. Said nothing that day. But I stopped sharing after that, stopped trusting. And I started planning. Over the next few months, while they celebrated wins built on my work, I started building something else, a backup plan. A new path. I began documenting every file, every version history, every Slack thread timestamped, archived, secured on an encrypted drive, not linked to any company system. I started contacting people quietly, people who had left the company, some pushed out, some burned out. People like Jonah from Data Ops who Built the forecasting module before Kelsey even joined, or Priya from client strategy, who was mysteriously laid off. After closing our biggest contract of the year, what we uncovered a pattern, a culture of exploitation disguised as excellence. And so we began building something of our own, something better. That night, as I walked away from the gala, snow crunching beneath my heels, I felt nothing but calm. I had sent the message not to my manager, not to HR, to the legal team, the media contact, and, most importantly, to our top 5 clients, each of whom had expressed growing frustration with our new direction. Attached proof of theft, of misuse, of lies, and a very simple proposal. The next 30 minutes would change everything. But I didn't wait around. I just kept walking. I didn't even make it to the subway station before the call started. 125-1138. The screen glowed with names I knew too well. Dominic, HR, the COO, even Kelsey. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what they were going to. I'd heard it all before. Just business. You're a team player, right? This isn't personal. But this time it was deeply personal. Because they hadn't just taken my work, they'd taken my voice, my credibility. And when they locked me out of that gala, they made one final mistake. They underestimated me. When I got back to my apartment that night, I didn't celebrate. I changed into sweatpants, tied my hair back, and opened my laptop. It was time to confirm what I already suspected. The documents had been opened, downloaded, forwarded. Screenshots had been taken. The metadata told me everything. I logged into our secure workspace, ours, not theirs, and saw the green light flash. Connected. Jonah, Priya, Elise. We were live. Status, I type. Priya responded first. PR CFO forwarded the client memo at 8:11 p.m. Legal read the report at 8:17. Dominic opened the contract audit log. Jonah chimed in next. JN, one of the clients, Westin Freight, asked for a meeting tomorrow morning. They saw your offer. Looks like they're ready to talk. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, not from fear but clarity. Every move we made was within bounds. Every document cited public performance metrics, internal reporting files I had access to, and client F-facing data I had personally developed. And most importantly, every innovation they were parading around had my name stamped in the file. History. Let me be clear, I didn't want to destroy anyone. I didn't want revenge. For its own sake. What I wanted was simple acknowledgement, fairness, a seat at the table I helped build. But when every door slammed shut, I realized I didn't need their table. Could build my own. Started 6 months earlier. The company had begun shifting its structure, or so they said. Realigning, Dominic called it. New faces appeared in Heil meetings. Titles shifted without explanation. People were promoted without performance reviews. Some teams saw layoffs. Others, like ours, saw sudden growth, just not for the people who'd earned it. The warning signs were everywhere. Priya had been leading our international client portfolio for 3 years when she was pulled off a major deal and replaced by someone with a fancier LinkedIn profile. She protested. 2 weeks later, her position was eliminated. Jonah, the data ops lead, built the system we all relied on for logistics efficiency. After requesting budget for upgrades, he was suddenly demoted and reassigned. No explanation, no justification. The message was clear. Loyalty doesn't matter. Politics do. I began archiving everything. Not in secret but in silence. Quietly, diligently. I stored version histories, email, receipts, meeting logs. I tracked deliverables and who presented them. When the intern, Kelsey, started showing up to meetings, quoting slides I hadn't shared with her, I added timestamps to everything I built. I never accused her, never confronted her. I just prepared. 3 months ago I reached out to Priya and Jonah, not with accusations but with a question. If you could build a company from scratch, how would you do it differently? We talked for hours, then weeks, then we began sketching. We weren't naive. We weren't planning to build a billion-dollar empire overnight. But we believed in something simple. A company that didn't reward exploitation. A company where impact outweighed title. Where talent wasn't wasted under middle managers obsessed with optics. We built the framework. Then we filed for an LLC. Under a name that meant something to all of us. Verdance, from verdant, meaning fresh growth after a long winter. Back in the apartment, the messages kept coming. Dominic, Ashley, call me immediately. This isn't how professionals handle things. Kelsey, I didn't know the whole story. Can we talk? Please HR, this matter has escalated. Would like to invite you for a formal meeting. I shut the laptop. It was too late for apologies. Too late for warnings dressed up as diplomacy. They called me a nobody. They'd laughed, toasted inside, while I stood in the cold. And now they were scared. The next morning we met with Westline Freight in a private video call. I presented our alternative system, more transparent, more efficient, more agile than anything Ethereum currently offered. They didn't hesitate. We've been waiting for someone to build this. The VP said, send over the paperwork. By noon we had our first official client. By 6 p.m., I was officially no longer employed at Ethereum. They didn't fire me. Resigned, sent my letter in silence. No speech, no fanfare. I just clicked send and felt free. By the time I woke up the next morning, my inbox had 112 unread messages. 3 of them were from the CEO himself. 16 from legal, just one from Kelsey. The subject line read, I think we made a mistake. She didn't know the half of it. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into Verdant's dashboard. Overnight, the Westline Freight deal had triggered a ripple effect. A second client, Atlas Port Group, reached out. After someone in their procurement department saw our presentation slides, likely forwarded by a frustrated contact. On the inside, they wanted a meeting. That afternoon I met with Jonah and Priya in the co-working space we were renting by the hour. There was nothing glamorous about it, just 3 desks, a coffee machine that sputtered more than it brewed, and a cracked window that whistled when the wind picked up. But it was ours. Jonah had barely slept. He looked exhausted but energized, like a man who just realized the cage door was open. I mapped out the optimization module, based on their most recent performance reports. He said, spinning his laptop around to show me the live dashboard. Priya leaned over his shoulder. If this works the way we think it will, it could cut Atlas Port's holding costs by 19%. In Q1 alone. My heart thudded in my chest. Let's make sure they see that clearly. We spent the next 4 hours rehearsing our pitch. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about credibility. Atlas Port was a $700 million company. If they signed with us, there was no turning back. Meanwhile, at Ethereum, panic was quietly bleeding through the cracks. Former co-workers started messaging me on private accounts, some congratulating me, others fishing for information. One DM stood out. Ashley, legal just pulled all our internal Slack archives. Everyone's paranoid. Dominic's locked in meetings with compliance. They think more people are leaving. Are they right? I didn't reply, but yes, they were. But 2 more employees had already agreed to join Verdance if our funding round closed. Elise from partnerships, Matt from enterprise sales. Both of them had been pushed aside or spoken over so many times they barely needed convincing. We weren't just building a company. We were building a haven. The Atlas Port meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. They logged in from a sleek glass-walled conference room. We logged in from a space with a flickering light overhead and a whiteboard still stained from someone else's brainstorm. But we were ready. Shared my screen and walked them through the entire framework. How we'd restructure their supplier prioritization model, use real-time data analytics to forecast bottlenecks, and provide executive-level dashboards that actually made sense. When I finished, no one said a word for 5 full seconds. Then came the question, why isn't your system already on the market? Priya answered, calm and direct. Because until now, the people who built it weren't the ones allowed to launch it. By 4:00 p.m. we had a verbal agreement. At 5:37 p.m., Dominic called again. This time he left a voicemail. Ashley, we need to talk. Look, I know things weren't handled perfectly, but going behind the company's back, poaching clients, that's career suicide. We can still fix this if you come in tomorrow. There's a new position we've been discussing, Vice President of Strategy. We can even talk equity. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about a title. At 6:02 p.m., I received an email marked urgent. It was from Aetherian's legal counsel. The subject line, cease and desist unauthorized use of confidential materials. They claimed I had violated confidentiality clauses by misappropriating intellectual property. They referenced client lists, pitch materials, and optimization models. But what they didn't realize or didn't want to admit was that everything I had used was created on my personal devices in my own time, well outside of my employment contract scope. And I had proof, logs, timestamps, witnesses, archived Slack threads. I sent a single reply. Please refer to Clause 9.4 in my signed agreement regarding independent developments. All materials presented to third parties were created without company resources or access to proprietary files. Your team's prior written acknowledgement of this was filed on July 3, 8:12 a.m. confirmed by IP audit logs. Happy to provide additional documentation if necessary. I never heard from legal again. At night, I sat in bed with a takeout box balanced on one knee and my laptop on the other. On the screen was a spreadsheet titled Pipeline Phase 2. There were 4 companies listed, all of them Ethereum clients. All of them had experienced recent issues, slow implementation, poor communication, tech stagnation. And all of them had previously reached out to me directly with questions before Dominic had ordered them redirected to someone more senior. Now they were circling back, not because of a grudge, not because of drama, but because they wanted solutions, real ones. At 11:48 p.m. I got one last message. From a number I didn't recognize. They're losing it. Kelsey's crying. Dominic's office light has been on for hours. You've shaken the whole place. Well, name, no signature, just someone watching the fallout from the inside. Stared at it for a moment, then locked my phone and closed my laptop. Tomorrow we'd meet with our third potential client, and this time we wouldn't be renting by the hour. Weeks after I stood outside that gala in the freezing cold, we secured our third client. We signed the contract inside our first actual office space, a converted third-floorer walk-up above a shuttered tailor shop downtown. Floor creaked, the windows stuck. The heating was unreliable, but I didn't care. It was ours. The contract was with Eastridge Freight Solutions, one of Aetherian's most profitable mid-tier accounts. They had quietly reached out to Jonah after reading about our deal with Atlas Port. The email said, "We've been concerned with declining service levels. We'd like to explore alternatives." It was only one sentence, but I'd read it 5 times. Eastridge moving their business. That was the first sign Aetherian had a real problem. And still, they didn't understand what was happening. On the 3rd Friday of that month, the story broke. We had just finished a late strategy session. Jonah was ordering pizza. Priya was running through implementation timelines when my phone lit up. Breaking internal shakeup at Ethereum Logistics amid client departures and former employee startup buzz. The headline hit Tech Today, then spread like wildfire. Within the hour, 4 other outlets picked it up. Our inbox was swamped with interview requests. LinkedIn exploded. Even a podcast host I'd never heard of messaged me asking for a guest slot. I didn't post anything. Not a statement, not a tweet. We didn't have to. The next morning I got an email from Rebecca Lang, a senior associate at Western Capital. She'd seen the press, reviewed our background, and wanted to set up a call. We met Monday over Zoom. She was sharp, concise, and didn't waste time. "I know early-stage funding isn't your focus yet," she said. "But if you're serious about scaling, we'd like to be involved. Your market fit is unusually strong for this stage. And the founding story, let's just say it resonates." She wasn't wrong. I told her we'd think about it. The truth was, we'd been bootstrapping, pulling from personal savings, side consulting gigs, and modest monthly retainers from our clients. But funding would change the game. The question was whether it would change us too. Meanwhile, Aetherian was in full containment mode. One of my former co-workers, Elise, forwarded a company-wide email she'd received. It was from Dominic. Subject: Navigating change with strength. We've experienced some recent transitions that have sparked external speculation. Please remember, we remain committed to our values of innovation, collaboration, and excellence. No single individual defines our success. Translation: panic thinly veiled as control. But behind the curtain, the numbers told a different story. For clients had left. 2 large enterprise deals were now on hold. Half a dozen key staff had either resigned or gone silent, likely planning their exits. Their stock dipped 11% in 10 days. In came the meeting with Weston. Rebecca and 2 partners offered us a $1.6 million seed round on a clean term. No grabby clauses, no creative equity traps. I should have been thrilled, but I was cautious. We spent the weekend reviewing the offer, every detail, every clause. I'd seen too many companies gain traction only to become swallowed by the same politics they tried to escape. Wouldn't happen here. Priya said it best. We didn't leave one broken machine just to build another. We negotiated for founder-controlled governance, non-dilutive grants for our first hires, commitment to inclusive hiring practices written into our operating agreement. They agreed. We signed the term sheet. Monday morning, Verdens officially had funding. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't dependent on anyone's permission to lead. Later that week, Dominic made a public statement, not a press release, a video. It was 2 minutes and 44 seconds long. Slick lighting, company banners behind him, a carefully written script. Innovation is a collective journey. He said, "We celebrate all contributors, past and present. We wish our former employees well in their ventures, but rest assured, Aetherian's foundation is strong." The smile at the end was hollow. What really caught my eye, though, was the twitch in his left hand, the slight tremble, the forced calm. He knew the ground was shifting. He just didn't know how fast. That same evening, Elise called me. "I'm done," she said. "I can't stay there anymore. It's like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Nobody trusts each other. Half the team's pretending nothing's wrong, and the other half is updating their resumes during lunch." I didn't push her. I didn't offer a job. But 3 days later she sent me a message. "You have space for someone who still believes in building something real. I'm in." We onboard Elise as our client success lead the following Monday. Her first order of business, finalizing the onboarding process for Vandry Maritime, our 4th client and our largest yet. They came to us without even being approached. Aetherian overpromised and underdelivered. Their CTO said, "You already seem to be delivering before we've even signed." That wasn't an exaggeration. Jonah had sent them a prototype dashboard as a sample. They showed it to their board. That night they called us. What we were building was working, not because it was loud or flashy, but because it was built on credibility, clarity, and the one thing Aetherian had forgotten: trust. And while they scrambled to salvage their image, we were just getting started. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I saw the email. Subject line: confidential. Meeting request from Aetherian Executive Board. First I thought it was a prank. The address was official. No spoofing, the message short and direct. Miss Carter, on behalf of Ethereans executive leadership, we request a private meeting to discuss potential avenues for collaboration or resolution. Sincerely, Preston Langley, chairman of the board. Preston Langley, the man whose name had only existed on letterhead and press releases, the shadow behind the curtain. Now he wanted a meeting with me. I read the message 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Priya and Jonah. Priya's reply came first. You know what this is, right? This isn't conversation. It's a containment strategy. Jonas was more succinct. They're panicking, we're doing something right. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning at a neutral downtown law office. I didn't go alone. Our counsel came with me and I brought printed documentation, just in case. The conference room was clinical. Glass walls, bottled water, a large screen no one used. Preston Langley was already seated when I arrived. Immaculate suit, silver cuff. Lynx, composed face. Dominic sat beside him wearing the same strange smile I remembered from my performance reviews. And next to him, surprisingly, was Kelsey. She didn't look smug this time. She looked tired. Thank you for coming, Langley said. Nodded. Let's keep it efficient. Dominic spoke first, trying to soften the ground. We recognized that mistakes were made, misunderstandings, breakdowns in communication. You mean the part where I wasn't allowed into the gala celebrating work I created? Asked evenly. He paused. We want to move forward constructively. Langley cut in. Miss Carter, we're prepared to make a serious offer. Ethereum would like to acquire Verdance, including its intellectual property and client relationships. In return, we're offering a high 7-figure payout, equity, and a leadership position, Chief Innovation Officer. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Kelsey. Her eyes flicked down. Couldn't meet my gaze. I turned back to Langley. You want to acquire the company you tried to discredit. The same company your legal team threatened 2 weeks ago. The same company that exists because you undervalued the people who built your success. Langley didn't flinch. Business evolves. You're clearly a talented leader, but competing against Ethereum is an uphill battle. We have scale, resources, reach. You also have a PR crisis, said. 4 major clients gone, a public stock dip, and a rapidly growing narrative that your company rewards the wrong people. Dominic shifted in his seat. Langley's voice hardened slightly. We don't intend to let this go on indefinitely. If you refuse the offer, we will pursue all available measures. Competitive blockades, legal routes, strategic buyouts of key personnel. Attorney leaned forward, none of which will hold up given our IP filings and non-compete exemptions under state law. Langley looked at me again. Ashley, you built something great, but you're still We're giving you a chance to fold it into something bigger. Secure your legacy and move on from this fight. Looked around the room, the polished table, the sterile walls, the people who once told me I wasn't worth a seat. And I reached into my folder and pulled out a single page. A graph, client growth by week. Verdant's line rising fast. Ethereum's declining client by client. I already am something bigger, I said quietly. I'm not here to secure my legacy. I'm building it. Langley looked. Dominic. Dominic looked at Kelsey. She finally spoke. I didn't know how much of it was yours. I only saw what I was given. Sorry. I gave her a slow nod. I believe you, but the damage was done. Langley stood. Very well. Well, consider this conversation closed. You stood too. No, Mr. Langley. Well, consider it closed. I'm just getting started. When we left that building, the sun was sharp and clear. It was still cold, but I didn't feel it. By the time we got back to the office, our inbox held a new message. Client inquiry, Global Apex. Freight. Their contract with Ethereum was up for renewal. They wanted a call. Jonah looked at me. Should we take it? Smiled. Let's make room. That night, we stayed late in the office, not to catch up, to prepare. Because the next step wasn't just growth. It was scaling. Real systems. Full-time staff, international expansion. They had offered me a title. I'd chosen a mission, and the ripple was turning into a wave. 1 year to the day. After I stood outside the gala with snow soaking through my shoes, I stepped onto a stage under bright lights. This time, invited. It was the annual Logistics and Innovation Conference, the biggest industry event of the year. My name was printed on the program as keynote speaker, and the room was full. Executives, investors, founders, analysts, and yes, even a few familiar faces from Ethereum. Funny how things come full circle. I stood at the podium and looked out at hundreds of faces. Some smiling, some skeptical, some waiting for a story. So I gave them one. Exactly 1 year ago today I began. Was told I wasn't on the list. I stood outside a gala, one that celebrated a project I had built, while my former co-workers toasted inside. Even the intern who had taken credit for my work was applauded while I stood in the cold. The room was silent. I didn't argue. I didn't knock on the door. I just pulled out my phone and pressed send. You could feel the shift. Some leaned in, others nodded just slightly. The quiet recognition of being excluded, of being overlooked. I didn't spend the speech attacking Ethereum. That wasn't the point. I didn't need to name them. They had already named themselves in headlines, in shareholder calls, in whispered updates across the industry. Instead, I told the truth. Verdens had started with 3 people in a co-working space and grown to a team of 42. How we had launched with 0 external funding and now operated in 3 countries serving 12 major clients, 7 of whom had once worked with Ethereum. How we built a company where people stayed late not because they were scared but because they were invested. Where performance reviews didn't reward who talked the loudest, but who built the most. I shared our framework, our hiring process, our team principles, the things we said no to just as much as the things we said yes to. And finally, I shared the most important part. We didn't succeed because we wanted revenge. We succeeded because we knew something better was possible. We left the old table behind and built our own. One where everyone has a seat and no one has to beg to be seen. Finished. Quiet applause. The kind that builds slowly, not because people feel obligated but because something landed. I stepped down from the stage, my heart full. Not from pride but peace. After the keynote, there was a long line of people wanting to talk. Founders, analysts, even students from the university who'd been invited. But one person stood a little apart from the line. Kelsey. She looked different. Softer somehow. Her expression was cautious, not arrogant. When I walked over, she held out her hand. I just wanted to say congratulations, she said. That was a powerful speech. Thank you, I replied. And I meant it. I've been at a different company since June, she added. Still trying to figure out who I am when I'm not following someone else's script. That surprised me. I hope they're treating you better. They are, she said. But I needed to hear this today. I gave her a small nod. We all start somewhere. What matters is where we decide to go next. She smiled. Good luck with Verdance. I looked around the conference center. My name on banners, people holding Verdance branded folders. Our booth crowded with curious attendees. We don't need luck, I said gently. We just need the chance to do what we were already doing all along. Just in the right place. The next week, Verdance closed its series of funding round. $8 million led by one of the same firms that had once passed over my resume without a second look. We opened new offices in Austin and Rotterdam. Hired our 50th employee. Hit a profitability milestone ahead of schedule. But none of that was what stuck with me. What stuck with me were the emails. Dozens of them from people I didn't know, analysts, designers, account managers, former interns, people who'd been told they were just something, just a junior, just support, just a number. Your story made me quit my job. Your keynote made me rethink what kind of leader I want to be. Reminded me I'm not crazy for wanting respect. And this one, thank you for showing us that being excluded doesn't make us less valuable. It just means we were never meant to stay there. Sometimes I think about that night. The cold, the laughter through the windows, the sting in my chest. It doesn't hurt anymore. Now I think about the people inside that ballroom and I wonder if they ever realized how close they were to keeping me. If someone had just said, "Hey, you deserve to be here," maybe none of this would have happened. But I'm glad they didn't, because being pushed out forced me to stop asking for space and start creating it instead. Real victory wasn't taking clients or headlines or market share. It was showing what can happen when you stop trying to squeeze into someone else's version of success and start building something of your own. Not in spite of being excluded, but because of